housing opportunity. And I know that you've had the chance, I think on a number of occasions, to travel with the president. I did that recently. I heard that you're going to do that again soon. What would you say are the administration's top priorities right now when it comes to providing greater affordable housing opportunity?
Mr. Secretary, you know, we got these two secretaries, so it's Mr. Secretary. In this time of inflation, if we do not deal with housing, we will never deal with inflation. Housing is the most expensive driver of inflation in the country today. When you realize the fact that we are in a situation where there's certainly not enough supply for the demand. So what is happening is because we have not invested in housing for more than 50 years in this country, really invested in it. It has finally caught up with us. And so because there's so little supply, the people who have housing have made the prices so high, there is no more affordable housing in this country. And until we can take some stress off the housing market, we are not going to deal with inflation. So my discussions with the president, and primarily he gives us three charges. The first is to look at housing through a lens of equity. Because we have still, even in our department, things that have been ingrained so, but they are still so racist that we need to try to root out some of them. Secondly, find a way to put more housing, more low-income and moderate housing into the market. And so we're doing that through things like CDBG and Home and Housing Trust Fund and LIHTC and increasing the caps on LIHTC, all the kinds of things that we know that we can do. And third, and just as importantly, is to make sure that people, black and brown people in particular, who otherwise would qualify for a mortgage and are inhibited or stopped because maybe they have too much student loan debt, which is a number one driver, or other reasons, to be sure that we now level the playing field. And so I think that we have done that by putting in new tools and making some changes in how FHA secures mortgages. So those are the three things that I'm really charged to do. But then I add as well public housing. You know, most of our public housing is more than 50 years old. We have not maintained it. We have not invested in it. And so we are finding ourselves in a position where we have not done any real capital improvements, and it has caught up with us to a point where I am embarrassed and ashamed to go into some places that are public housing, that we will allow people in this country to let people live that way.
Prices are once again pricing millions of Americans out of the market. The new data shows that the problem's only getting worse. Pieces of ideas, criticism of your campaign is its concepts of ideas. What specifically can you tell the people at home and in this room you could do as vice president with President Trump to make housing prices decrease?
Yeah. So first thing is I want to thank all of you for being here. Chris, thanks to you and I just appreciate you caring enough about the country to pay attention and to listen to the answers that I'm giving here for the next hour. But let me think, when we talk about housing, it's useful to talk about two separate sides of the housing problem. There's a supply issue and there's a demand issue. Okay, so the supply issue is we don't build enough houses for the people that we have in the United States of America. And there are complicated reasons why we don't do that, right? One is that energy prices are too high. So if we drill, baby drill, open up America's energy markets, lower the cost of energy, then we make it easier to build houses. There's also a lot of stuff that we do on the regulatory side, both at the state and the federal level, to make it harder to build homes. Organizations like NEPA, which make it harder for the United States to build. And I always remind people that our ancestors went to the moon with pocket calculators and slide rulers, and now our government makes it way too hard to build the homes that we need. Now, that's the supply side of it. I think most people actually agree with that. I think if you've asked most Democrats, they'd probably agree with what I just said. What I'm going to say about the demand problem is a little bit more controversial, but I think it's just as important, which is that when you let 25 million illegal aliens, and I think that's the number that we have in our country right now, when you let those folks in your country at the level that we have, well, you got to put them somewhere, right? They have to live somewhere. And that means that those are homes that aren't going to American citizens. In other words, if you take a neighborhood and you add hundreds, or you take a city and you add tens of thousands, or you take a country and you add 25 million people competing against Americans for scarce homes, homes, that's going to drive the cost of housing through the roof too. And there's no coincidence that when we've seen under Kamala Harris's open border, the highest levels of immigration, illegal immigration in our country, basically in our history, that's coincided with the highest levels of house price increases that we've seen in our country in a very long time. I think in Michigan, the number's about 50%. Rents and housing prices have gone up by 50%. We could do a lot better, but simply we got to build more houses, and we got to make sure those houses go to American citizens, people who have the legal right to be here.
So you got a little of rates pricing people out and wages not coming up enough. So give a nod to that. On the wage side,
Of course.
not just immigration, but how do you argue that you will get wages up in America? What mechanism can government do?
Well, one is we got to promote prosperity for everybody, right? If you're creating more jobs in the United States of America, especially the good middle-class manufacturing jobs that built the middle class in our country, but also particularly in the state of Michigan. Unfortunately, what we've seen under present leadership, under Kamala Harris, is you got to create better jobs. You're absolutely right about that. You mentioned mortgage interest rates, and that's something I should have talked about but didn't in the original answer. Mortgage rates are so high because inflation is so high, right? Mortgage rates track with the broader inflation. So when you talk about Kamala Harris casting the deciding vote on trillions of dollars of new spending, when you talk about going to war against American energy, which makes everything more expensive, when you drive up prices, you do drive up interest rates. And one final point I'll make about this, Chris, is when you talk...
Ms. Crockett, I show you registered to testify as Jasmine Crockett on behalf of U.S. Rep. Jasmine Crockett and self against House Bill 4. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Please give us your testimony.
So, first of all, it is a sham that we sit here and y'all pretend as if you care about what the people have to say, but we are going to make y'all listen as long as you will. This map does nothing but divide, distract, and depress. There is this idea that was put out there during his opening remarks that this does so much for black folk. Well, let me tell you, as a black person, it does not. Let me tell you that in this map, to be clear, y'all added two additional Anglo majority seats. Now, when we went through the 21 maps, you added 2 Anglo majority seats, and now you're adding 2 more Anglo majority seats, and then you've decided that you are going to pack and crack, and that is the language that I am going to use because that is the legal language. And I also just want to remind y'all really quickly that it does not look good when you take every economic engine out of my district and then tell me that I am supposed to sit here and be so happy because you added black folk from a whole other community. When you want to talk about monoliths and whether or not they exist, this idea that you just take people and move them around. I have 200,000 people who were never in my district, and my district is 766,000. Playing move minorities around so that you can somehow claim that this is nothing but partisanship. The only way that you get here is by making sure that you trample upon the rights and the liberties and the voices of minorities. So let me give you a few facts about the state of Texas. The state of Texas only has 39% Anglos, yet somehow under this map, we are going to have somewhere near 60-something, almost 70% of these seats are going to be chosen by Anglos. If we were looking for fairness and to follow the Voting Rights Act, you'd have 15 Latino opportunity seats, 15 Anglo seats. You then have 4 African-American opportunity seats. Then you'd have 2 Asian opportunity seats, and the other 2 seats would belong to coalitions because we are a majority-minority state where over 60% of this population is people of color. So if you want to do what's fair and right under the Voting Rights Act, as well as if you say that this Fifth Circuit Court case matters and somehow changes everything, my question to you is, when are y'all gonna do y'all's maps? Because you did your maps in 2021 and then the case came out and I haven't seen y'all talk about the fact that you're gonna redistrict the House and the Senate.
Welcome to the Second to None podcast. I'm your host, and today we're diving deep with a powerful message. No rent, no lease, no debt. This episode is brought to you by TheySource, the CMOS company. TheySource stands with our community, helping connect underserved families and individuals to financial tools, home ownership programs, and economic empowerment resources. Visit theysource.com to learn more about your health and all natural health products today. If you're tuning in today and you're tired of renting, tired of leasing, tired of paying a mortgage, tired of being stuck in someone else's cycle of debt and lease dependency, you are not alone. This message is for you, and for the Black, Latino, and underserved white families who've been told, you can't, or you're too late. We've all seen it. Rent going up, leases getting shorter, debt mounting. It feels like we're spinning our wheels paying someone else's mortgage. But what if I told you ownership doesn't wait for perfect? It begins with a decision. Because owning something, even something modest, flips the script. It shifts you from paying someone else's mortgage to building your own equity. It says, I matter. My block matters. My future matters. Let's talk about the trap first. Renting and leasing and paying a 30-year mortgage at 40 or 50 might seem safe, familiar, but here's the truth. When you rent, you pay someone else's asset. When you own a lot, a house, a small building, you create your asset. And debt, the wrong kind of debt, the consumer debt, the lease trap debt, keeps you tethered. Ownership helps you escape. To our listeners who are Black or Latino, history has stacked the deck. Generations of housing exclusion, redlining, exclusionary lending. To our underserved white listeners, you feel it too. The rising cost of living, the shrinking chances of home ownership, the feeling that the door keeps closing. This podcast isn't about blame, it's about power. We're all on this path together. We're all in this movement together. Let me share some examples. Imagine a family in San Antonio who purchased a modest home, a small 2-bedroom fixer-upper. It wasn't glamorous. It needed sweat. It needed time. But they bought it. They worked on it. They stayed. Over 5-10 years, that property started building value. The neighborhood improved. They had a place they could call their own. They added to it. They bought the house or land next door for pennies on the dollar at an auction and kept building. Eventually, they had the biggest house and all the newest appliances with no debt. How amazing is that? That story is the lives of some people, but not the story for most. When you own property, you anchor your future. When you rent forever, you're helping someone else build theirs. Now, recall what San Antonio's own Julián Castro, former HUD secretary, said. Home ownership, for most Americans, that makes up the bulk of their wealth. And he added, that's especially true for Black Americans and people of color. Families of color know this truth. White families suffering the same affordability challenge, you feel it too. Ownership is the leveler. And here's J.D. Vance, representing a different political perspective on the GOP side, pointed out this unpleasant fact. They have access to lower interest rates. They completely crowd out the availability of homes for people who want to just buy a piece of their community. So listen, this isn't about party lines. It's about property lines. It's about reclaiming space for our communities, our families, our future. Your 40 acres and a mule was not given to us, so we have to get it ourselves. But we gon' get it regardless. But you owe us. You gon' send my tax dollars over to other countries and say you can't pay reparation. Yes, you can. You lying to us. But we still gon' get it. And don't forget you owe us, like Dr. Martin Luther King said about the bad check. Martin Luther King Jr. said the U.S. owed a debt to its Black citizens, most famously in his I Have a Dream speech, where he described a promissory note from the nation's founders that was returned marked insufficient funds. He elaborated on this in his 1964 book, Why We Can't Wait, arguing the debt should be paid with a massive program of special compensatory measures in the form of reparations for centuries of unpaid wages and oppression. So, how do we start? 3 practical steps. Step 1. Get educated. Use BTG EquiThink resources on our Second to None podcast website, homebuyer classes, financial readiness, mentorship programs. Visit secondtonone.com. Step 2. Start where you are. Maybe it's a modest property. Maybe it's a lot. Maybe it's a duplex you live in and rent a portion. The number doesn't matter. The act of owning matters. Step 3. Consider collective models, community land trusts, cooperative ownership, shared equity programs. When the system didn't build doors for us, we build doors for each other. Because the barrier isn't just money. It's systems, it's mindsets, it's belief. And we're changing that. Imagine a future, no rent, no lease, no debt looming. Instead, a mortgage on your home or rental income from your property. Stability, dignity, ownership. Too many of us have been stuck in glorified renting, paying month after month with nothing to show for. Sure, you got a home, but it's not paid for. At your age, you will never pay it off, and you're stuck in a life of debt, and maybe upside down on your mortgage. That ends now. Take back your life. You gave a choice to give it away and pay interest. We build community wealth. We build generational equity. Every property owned by our community is one less owned by someone else. To every listener, if you're tired of making someone else rich, it's time to start making yourself rich in equity, in control, in legacy. EquiThink stands with you. Visit secondtononepodcast.com/EquiThink. There, you will find a community-driven policy lab advancing economic mobility and cultural equity. And remember, like and follow our podcast, Second to None Podcast, on YouTube and all major podcast platforms so you never miss an episode of community power, strategy, and transformation. This is our moment. This is our mission. No rent, no lease, no debt, forever. Together, Black, Latino, underserved white, we own our future, do not give it away, and pay interest on it. If you'd like to sponsor an upcoming episode of Second to None Podcast and join us in uplifting real conversations for real communities, reach out today. Whether you're a local business, nonprofit, or entrepreneur, your sponsorship helps us keep these messages alive. Visit secondtononepodcast.com/sponsor or contact our team to learn more about partnership opportunities and community visibility through EquiThink on the Second to None podcast. Thank you for listening. This episode of the Second to None podcast is brought to you by TheySource, the all-natural sea moss company. TheySource.com is San Antonio's trusted home for premium, wild-crafted sea moss, sustainably harvested from the Caribbean and rich in essential minerals the body needs. TheySource offers raw sea moss, gels, capsules, and herbal blends that support digestion, immunity, and overall wellness. Every product is 100% organic, non-GMO, and backed by quality testing, helping the community embrace a healthier, more natural lifestyle. Visit theysource.com today. Until next time, keep building, keep owning, keep believing, and stay second to none.